can you? I didn't understand the difference between awareness minus Maya and awareness plus Maya. Can you explain it again?
Okay. Yeah, all right. Before there's Maya.
It's only the potential of creation.
Well, but I mean that everything's awareness. And before the world was created, before there was any creation, there was awareness. But there was no Maya.
So minus Ishvara.
That's right. All right. Then, well, yeah, there is a before. Because Maya appears and disappears. Maya is not the self. So the scientists will tell you there was a time when the world wasn't here. Won't they? What do you mean, yeah, but?
That's not my experience.
Well, yeah, but that's that's true, but that's a scientifically verified fact. I mean, that's your experience is one thing. That's called Jiva Shristi. That's your experience, but but knowledge tells us that the world wasn't here at some time. Which means that Maya wasn't here. If there's no world here, then there's no Maya. Because the world is an effect of Maya. Maya is the cause of the world. So whenever Maya is operating, there's a world. And this world, the scripture says, and science more or less corroborates it, this world lasts for 500 billion years, however long. A long time. That as it goes, it's slowly decaying. It's losing the energy that was in it. It's gradually dissipating. And at some point, the whole creation will just dissolve. Well, what does that mean? That means Maya has what? Ceased to function. They call it the night of Brahman in the scriptures. When Maya is operating, it's called the day of Brahman. That means that awareness plus Maya equals a day. In other words, the manifestation of all things. There's light on objects. But once that, because anything created is going to be destroyed. This we know. So if this is a creation, and that's what Ishvara means, or Maya means the creator, then that creation is going to end. And the reason it's going to end is because Maya has served its purpose. And that Maya will retreat or disappear for another 445 billion years. In other words, the whole universe will sleep as a potential in awareness. And then the next kalpa, the next cycle, the next cosmic cycle, it will come out again. And all the jivas and all the karmas will emerge again, but they go back into seed state and they sleep inside in awareness as potential. Okay? Yes.
I have a question about emotions.
Yeah.
So we talked about the subtle body, we talked about the mind as one function of the subtle body,
Yeah.
and we talked about the structure, how the perception is put together to one
Yes.
experience,
Yeah.
is given to the
Intellect. Yeah.
who looks down to the causal body
Up or down to the causal body.
and decides what to do and tells the ego what to do. And then you told us that there's a relink to the mind again, where recording emotion is produced.
Yeah.
So emotions are a sub-function of the mind?
Yeah.
That's right?
That's one function of the mind.
Okay,
The mind has these three functions. It integrates sense information,
doubting.
and it doubts, it questions things, and it emotes, it creates emotions.
And these emotions, are there categories of it, such as bad and good emotions?
No, there's the emotions are, the bad and good are your interpretation of the emotions.
Okay. And
In other words, that's called Jiva Shristi. Jiva creates a world around his or her experience. And so if there's an emotion that's good, Jiva will label it, he likes that emotion, he'll label that good. For example, revenge. Now, for some jivas, that's a very bad emotion, but for others, it's a very sweet emotion. So, yeah, okay.
what's the purpose of, or what's the function of this function? Is it just for the Jiva Mukta to have an indicator that there are vasanas working when an emotion appears, or what is the function of this function in this
You mean,
in the subtle body? What are they good for? Every function has its purpose in this construct of subtle body. I understand.
yeah.
But what's the meaning?
Well, those are just stages in the chain of causation of stimulus and response.
It's at the end is the emotion,
Huh? No, then the action.
the action. But
Yeah. Although you can have an emotion and not act on it.
is the emotion the purpose to support the action, to feel
Yes.
I'm doing
Yeah.
it right?
Yeah.
What's
No,
purpose?
the emotion drives the action.
So it's before the action.
Yeah, it's prior to the action. First is a thought, and then it is emotion, and then an action.
It goes from mind to intellect.
Well,
back to mind.
Back to mind, and then to.
Emotion, and this
That's right, and then
causes the ego to act.
that's right.
Is the doer the
First it goes the ego, and then first the ego is actually a thought in the intellect.
Yeah.
So once the intellect has decided what to do, then the subtle body creates this thought, I will do. The doer, the doer thought occurs. Now the doer can't move the body. It needs emotions to do that. So once the doer has set in action, then the subtle body supplies the emotion that's necessary for the action, and that activates the pranas and the sense organs, and the active organs, and then there's a reaction.
So the emotions are the gas that runs.
They're the gas. They're the gas. That's right. They're motivators.
Yeah.
They're movers. Your emotions drive you.
But they depend on the thoughts you have.
Yeah, you'll never have an emotion without a thought. You know, the thought may be buried, because I remember this whole process takes place instantly. So it goes it's going spinning, and the more vasanas there are, the faster this chakra spins. So you may not notice the thought that's behind the emotion. But when you get your mind slowed down after a while, you'll see that this is why emotional release and these therapies that deal only with emotions, without dealing with the cognitive function, without dealing with the thoughts, never work. They just calm you down for a few minutes, or an hour or two, or maybe a day, whatever it is, and then the problem comes back, the emotional problem comes back, because the underlying thought, or the thought behind the emotion, has never been exposed and addressed.
But I could emote about one thing, about one object in different ways, according to the guna, what is working.
That's right.
In, dominant.
That's right. According
Sometimes the thing don't touch me anyway. It's very far away, even if it could be a problem, but I don't feel like a problem. And then on another day, maybe it just brings me up. It's the same thing, but just on different times. Is this the gunas working?
yes,
Yeah.
everything is the working of the gunas. Tomorrow we're going to unfold the teaching of the gunas. This is a model that is the most sophisticated model for understanding the psychology of jivas. It's a very, very powerful teaching. That's why we save it to last. We have to get the whole thing set up, and then we explain the guna model. Yes. Yes.
How can I find out what Dharma is?
What your Dharma is.
Yeah.
What your dharma is? By what you really desire or want inside, what you really feel inclined to. Huh? Yeah, like some women, for example, feel the need to be mothers. Huh? So their dharma, so they need to, so they become mothers. Then that becomes their dharma. Others feel the need to be. Somebody may feel the need to go into business. When I was young, I had a little friend, and all he was interested in was money. He worked all the time. He stole money. He did everything he could. He sold Kool-Aid on the street, and he used to bury the money in cans near his house. And he died a multimillionaire years later. And he was still pinching pennies and chasing money when he was like 70 years old. That was his, he had a money vasana, and his nature was to make money. He was an entrepreneur or a criminal. That may be your nature. And so you follow your nature and you become a great criminal like John Gotti or Al Capone or one of these guys. They don't want to do any honest work, huh? Or what? A manager, or an artist, or whatever. Yes.
But it could be that the term is so complicated because in the Swadharma there could be that there are many contradictory tendencies.
Well, that's right.
And so you cannot say what the Dharma is, a bit of an artist, a bit of a criminal, a bit of a so you can see how to come through.
Yeah, well, whatever desire is coming up at the time is Ishvara functioning through you and asking you to play a particular role. Your dharma is the role that's associated with your unconscious or subconscious needs, with your karma. Now there comes a point where your dharma becomes a seeker. And then there are rules and laws, and you play a particular role called seeking. That happened to me. I was a businessman. All I did was chase money. And then I had a big epiphany, and I became a seeker. I sold my business. I just dropped out completely. I just left the life totally. There was nothing left of that life. And I just started off seeking, and so then I followed the dharma of a seeker. Then when I found out who I was, I couldn't seek anymore. So that dharma disappeared. Understand? Yes.
What's the difference between vasana and samskara?
Oh, that's a good question. Vasanas are the single or simple effects of an action. We call them the fragrance of the action. The word vasana means a fragrance. Like a perfume is a vasana, a fragrance. So whenever you do an action, it leaves just a trace in consciousness. It leaves a little smell or a whiff in consciousness. And samskaras are groups of similar vasanas that cluster together to make a complex. In psychology, they used to call it a complex. She has this complex or that complex. It means a group of similar thoughts or ideas that make up a particular character trait, like a dharma. Like artists always have the artistic samskara. There are always certain thoughts that all artists share. And it's not just a single vasana, but it's a group of vasanas that come together to make up your character. That's called your samskara. Okay? That's a good question. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I must be a good teacher because there's no questions. Yeah, Andreas.
So why is the point for me? Why is the causal body the sheath or the instrument for experiencing bliss?
Well, you mean why is it? What do you okay, what would you like what would you like to call the sheath of bliss? That bliss is an experience, isn't it? Huh? When does bliss happen? Huh? Well, it happens when you get what you want. Okay? When you get what you want, the mind turns inward and you experience bliss, you experience joy, you experience happiness. Isn't it? Why is that? Because the subtle body is no longer disturbed by a desire or a fear. When the subtle body's fear or desire is removed, the subtle body turns around and catches the reflection of bliss as it's coming from the causal body. And then you feel happy until the next desire or fear comes up, when then you feel cut off from your bliss. When you go to sleep, what do you experience? Bliss. That's why you want to sleep, and that's why when you're sleeping, and somebody wakes you up or something wakes you up, you don't feel happy, do you? Huh?
Yes.
Because you're in the bliss sheath. The waking state ego has become a subtle vritti, it's called a subtle thought, has become a deep sleeper called prajna. And that vritti or that thought allows awareness to experience itself as bliss. Awareness is bliss, but it's not experiential bliss. It's the bliss of knowledge. It's the bliss of knowing. It's confidence. It's not experiential bliss. It's not a feeling. But the feeling of bliss, the experience of bliss, is provided here in the causal body. That's the primary feeling. That's what everybody wants all the time, isn't it? That's why you want objects. You want objects, so when you get objects, you feel bliss.
And is it bliss there because the vasanas are in the seed state?
Yeah, it's pure tamas. Causal body is pure tamas. Ignorance is bliss. There's no modifications there. Huh? There's no, consciousness is not chopped up into experiences or disturbed by thoughts. Huh? It's just a mass of consciousness. Huh? And that's why the jiva, the sleeper jiva, feels good there. It's an absence of disturbance. In the waking state, in the dream state, there's no constant feeling of bliss. In the waking state, there's a feeling of bliss when your mind is relieved of a thought. In fact, in between every thought or desire and feeling, there's a little blip of bliss, unless the thoughts are packed so tightly that you don't have a chance, that bliss doesn't have a chance to like permeate through into the subtle body. When you in meditation, the reason people like to meditate is if they live a pure life and they slow their thoughts down for a long time, then they start to feel bliss, strong bliss in the waking state. And they don't want to get up. Why? Because the stream of thoughts that separate the causal and the subtle body has become so light and so thin, and the thoughts have slowed down so much that you feel bliss. And meditation really feels good. People will sit in those samadhis for hours and hours, sometimes days. In India, there's all kinds of stories of people who just sat in bliss for, 1 week or 2 weeks or something.
But that sounds to me that bliss is just possible to feel by jiva.
Yeah, that's right. It is. It's the self appearing as a jiva experiences the bliss. Because the self is a non-experiencing witness.
Yeah.
So it's not interested in feeling good or feeling bad. It doesn't, huh? It is what makes the experience of bliss known. So when the jiva is feeling blissful, awareness is illuminating that feeling of bliss in the jiva.
And in the direct path, they say you are deep sleep.
What does that mean?
And that's a difference to this.
Well, it depends on what they mean by deep sleep, and I talked with Greg Good about that, and I've been reading Atmananda. I still got some more of Atmananda to read, trying to figure out, because Atmananda talks about the self as if it were deep sleep, but I think they are using that as a symbol.
I think it's something like you have this bliss experience every night,
And there, and that's right. And there you're one with yourself. There you're one with yourself. With other words, you're not one with awareness. You're one with the causal body. There's an experiencer in the deep sleep, because that's an experience. There's an experiencer and there's an object of experience. The object of experience is bliss. That's called the bliss sheath. The direct path people are only interested in the experiential aspect of awareness. They're trying to get the jiva to understand that the experience of bliss is going on all the time, which it is. They're not interested in going beyond bliss. That's the cell. That's the of the direct path. You can find the bliss that's experiential bliss that's going on all the time in you. But we're not interested in that bliss. We're interested in knowing, the knower of the bliss. Because experiential bliss is only in deep sleep are you going to get constant experiential bliss, or in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The problem is that deep sleep and Nirvikalpa Samadhi end. So that kind of bliss is not helpful for us, is it? Because nobody wants, temporary bliss. Pardon?
Better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's better than nothing. It's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. Yes.
I think there's this experience when you enjoy music.
Yeah, that's a bliss sheath.
Exposition or
Yeah, sure. That
even nature or sunshine or
absolutely. That's the bliss sheath. We call that Vishayananda. Ananda means bliss. Ananda, anda means not ending. Ananda means bliss. It's an experience where there's no end, or apparently no end. It's an experience of fullness. And we call it Vishayananda because what? It's awareness, right? The bliss of awareness that's reflecting on the causal body when your needs are being met, when your desires are being fulfilled. See, when you have a desire to listen to music, then the music comes, then you're satisfied, and then you feel bliss all along as it goes. You can feel blissful for hours listening to music. Right? And that bliss is not coming from the music. It's because I might listen to that music and not feel blissful at all. You know, these kids playing, their boom boxes and their rap music, and they're in bliss. Huh? But if I listen to that, I'm immediately angry. So it's obviously not the music that they're experiencing that's causing the bliss. It's the causal body that's causing the bliss. And since they have vasanas for that kind of music, when those vasanas are being satisfied, they're in the bliss sheath. They're experiencing bliss. Yes, sir.
You talked about samadhi, and I want to know if Mahasamadhi means necessarily that the body, this body is dead.
If Mahasamadhi, well, that they call death Mahasamadhi, huh? In other words, that's a term that's used to describe death.
I don't know if it means if I'm going into samadhi not just for a certain time, but I'm like.
You mean Mahasamadhi? Yeah. Mahasamadhi means when all your all your thoughts stop for good. Because they're defining samadhi as samadhi. Like, there's two samadhis, okay? There's two basic samadhis. One is called nirvikalpa samadhi, and the other is called savikalpa samadhi. Now, in nirvikalpa samadhi, there's no vikalpas. A vikalpa means mental activity, mental or emotional activity. That's what a vikalpa is. It's a wave in awareness. So there's no waves in awareness. In deep sleep, it's similar to nirvikalpa samadhi, but you're not conscious. In nirvikalpa samadhi, you're conscious, but there's no vikalpas, so actually there's no experience, because you need a vikalpa or a thought to have an experience. So there's no knowledge and no experience, but there's just you, awareness. So that's a state that's mimicking, or the closest state you can get to awareness. The problem is that state ends when the next vikalpa comes up, the next thought arises. And since you're not in charge of the vikalpas, the thoughts, when Ishvara decides to think through you, then you come out of that samadhi. And many people say that samadhi is moksha. That's, in fact, in yoga generally, and many yogic traditions and so forth, that particular samadhi is called moksha. It's not. Unfortunately, it's not. Now, savikalpa, and now what does the word samadhi mean? You have to look at the word. It's a compound word. Sama and di. Di means buddhi. Buddhi means the intellect, the subtle body or the intellect. So buddhi, and sama means equal. So that means equal intellect. Now that we're not done with this unfolding of this term. Equal. What does equal intellect means? It means that intellect, a subtle body that sees everything as having equal value. That values everything,
Without likes and don't likes.
Yeah, that's right. There's no likes and no dislikes involved in it. It's not judging what it sees. There's a lovely statement in the Yoga Shastra that says, a yogi in samadhi sees no difference between a lump of gold and the shit of a crow. There's a lump of gold and a crow shit, and the yogi sees no difference. So he thinks, I'll go to the bank, I'll take the crow shit. Put the crow shit in the bank. Take the gold to the bank, but I'll take the crow shit too because I don't see any difference. No, that's not what it means. He knows this is crow shit and he knows this is gold, but he knows they're both nothing but what? Awareness. Appearing in different forms. So that's what samadhi is. When you see everything as awareness, then what? There's no like or there's no dislike because all things are equal. Now, savikalpa samadhi means samadhi with thoughts. In other words, there are things to see. That's called savikalpa samadhi. There are all these different objects, but you don't value them differently. In nirvikalpa samadhi, there's no objects to see because there's no vikalpas. Now, maha samadhi, or sahaja samadhi. Sahaja samadhi means, right, constant samadhi, or then your natural samadhi. Now, what is sahaja means either natural or it means conscious or continuous, because what's continuous is what's natural. In other words, it means awareness. So your natural samadhi is what? The bliss of awareness. That's your natural samadhi. We define awareness as samadhi, saving us the trouble of trying to get in samadhi. We say, if you look at things from awareness's point of view, everything's equal. So all you have to do is identify yourself as awareness, and then that's samadhi. So you don't have to do a lot of efforts to try to get your mind in a state. In other words, you needn't make any experiential efforts to make everything seem to be equal. Because the doer still remains. Yes?
But in yoga, samadhi seems such a big thing.
Yeah.
It's so far away and you have to...
It's a goal, yeah. It's a big... Actually, it's not a big thing at all. If you look at your experience, you have fleeting samadhis all the time throughout the day. Huh? There's a beautiful little section in the third chapter of Tripura Rahasya. It's a Puranic text, Vedanta Puranic text. It's called On the Uselessness of Fleeting Samadhis and the Way to Wisdom. That's what the heading is called. So all samadhis are useless. Why? Because they begin and end. If something begins and ends, what good is it? We've already determined that nobody's happy with something with a feeling the good feeling that stops. You're happy when a good feeling comes, but when it goes, you're not happy. That's why every kind of experience, spiritual experience and other thing, have an upside and a downside. And there's nothing wrong with samadhi. It's just that you get attached to that experience. And then, just like sex or food or any one of those things, it's exactly the same psychology is operating. And then when the experience goes, then what? You become unhappy. And then you strive to get your samadhi back. Yes?
So the nirvikalpa samadhi in the yogic tradition is a way, it's a paradox for a normal mind, to experience an experience without an experience. An experience without an object.
Yeah. But it's not like you practice nirvikalpa samadhi, because how can you practice it? In nirvikalpa samadhi, there's no doer. Because the doer is a vikalpa. We've already determined the doer is just a thought. So if there's no vikalpa, then there's no doer. Now those samadhis happen. It happened to me a few times. For some reason, everything just disappears. And there's no you there to know how long you weren't there. But at some point you reappear, and then you realize you haven't been there for a while. You don't even know how long it was because you weren't there and you have no way of measuring it. And you weren't asleep and you didn't feel bad, you just were not there. That's all. But all of that took took place in awareness. Understand? Yeah, see, this is the problem with the experiential enlightenment is I'm striving for an experience. I think that enlightenment is when I get this particular experience that doesn't end and always feels good. You wouldn't try to go for Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Salvikalpa Samadhi unless what? You thought that it felt good. Nirvikalpa Samadhi doesn't feel good because there's nobody there to feel anything. Salvikalpa Samadhi feels great. And Salvikalpa Samadhi, which is the Samadhi we have in our teaching here, that's a perfect Samadhi, a perfect experiential state for self-realization. Because the self is, the reflection of the self is available. That's why you feel steady and still. That's why you feel peaceful. You can feel it right now. Can you feel the peace? Can you feel the silence? Just feel it. You can just feel the silence and the peace that's here. See how the mind, how quiet it is? That's called samadhi. Now, your mind is still working, but it's still. You're still conscious, you're observing your mind, but the mind is still. Little thoughts come in, little thoughts go out, but my basic composure, my basic bliss, my basic peace is another word for bliss, that peace remains. And the thoughts arise in the samadhi, and they die in this experience. This samadhi is just sattva guna. I'm going to talk about it tomorrow, the gunas. Right? The teaching makes the mind sattvic. And then you start experiencing the bliss of awareness, but what? You're completely conscious. The mind is turned inward, and then knowledge takes place. Then you can absorb knowledge, yes.
So isn't it the nature of the intellect to discriminate and to value things?
Yeah.
When it stops this function, is it because of sattva?
Or yeah, well, it's because of sattva in the form of knowledge. Knowledge is sattva.
And does it mean at the other side that the intellect just works on tamas and rajas?
Yes. If rajas and tamas are if the intellect is rajasic, predominantly rajasic or tamasic, it's completely different experience from when it's sattvic. Because these gunas permeate every aspect of this existence because they're right at the top of the creation. So the intellect can be sattvic, a combination of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. The doer can be sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. The mind can be sattvic, rajasic. And you find in one person there's an amazing variety of human beings, owing to the fact that there are 29 or 24 cosmic principles here, and all of those can be either sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic, or some combination of the three. This is why you get such an amazing variety of jivas, because of the gunas. The number of factors that go into making a jiva, and the three gunas that are continuously recycling in various permutations and combinations. I had one more thought about that. Oh, Maha, so Savikalpa is perfect for moksha. Because you're in the presence of reflected awareness. And your mind is sattvic, which means the reflection of awareness and is non-different, is non-separate from awareness. In other words, by meditating on the reflection, you can gain the knowledge of awareness in that samadhi. This is why Vedanta says yoga's fine. It's an indirect path. We call it a leading error. It's an error, but it leads you to the self, but indirectly. Because you don't know that you're going for moksha. I mean, you think you're going for moksha, and you think it's experiential, but you don't know that moksha is knowledge that I'm awareness. But after you've been in this samadhi for a while, and it hasn't been made perfect, and you switch from you haven't been able to make the samadhi perfect, you switch from an experiencer to an inquirer. You start asking questions. You say, what the hell is this? This is weird. Who's trying to make this samadhi permanent? And what is this self here? And what is the reflection? And who knows this thing? You start to think. And when you start to think, then what? Then knowledge can come. Ramana, he fell in that Savikalpa samadhi state when he was 17. And for some reason, it's quite unusual. Because when you practice samadhi, when you go for samadhi, you're just going for experience. So you think that thoughts are bad. Huh? You're told that thoughts are the enemy. You want to get rid of the thoughts. But knowledge comes in the form of a thought. So even if the knowledge I'm awareness arises in that samadhi, you'll dismiss it and you'll stay with the feeling of the samadhi. Because you're only interested in the experience or the feeling. And you'll ignore the knowledge that's there with the feeling. Because with every experience, the knowledge and the experience are sitting there together. But since you value only the feeling, the emotional side of the experience, you discard the knowledge. Now in Ramana's case, he had the experience, and what did he get? He grabbed the knowledge. That's what he says. If you read his story, he said, and then he wasn't discussing all the feeling, huh? That wasn't what he said. And then I realized that I was what? Awareness. I was the self, he said. And when the samadhi ended, the knowledge didn't disappear. That knowledge is permanent. Experience is impermanent. So knowledge is always good. No matter what you're feeling, knowledge always works. And you should operate your life on the basis of knowledge, no matter how you feel. If you operate on the basis of knowledge, you'll never go wrong. But if you operate your life on the basis of how you feel and your feelings, you'll always be emotional. And you'll never be satisfied or happy. Because this whole creation is made out of knowledge. And knowledge is the greatest bliss. There's no bliss like the bliss of knowledge. That bliss is total confidence. Total absolute confidence in yourself. No matter how you feel. No matter how good you feel or how bad you feel, you're totally okay with yourself. Because you are yourself. Yes, Andreas.
Early satsang, you said enlightenment or liberation is not the experience of freedom, it's the freedom from experience.
Yeah.
So there is...
And it is experience of freedom
there
too.
There is the experience of freedom, but this refers to the experiential bliss which comes also from the causal body.
Yeah.
And there is freedom from experience.
Both.
And this is not an experiential bliss, it's the bliss of knowing.
That's right.
I'm the knower of all ever-changing experience.
That's right. It's the bliss of knowledge. And that bliss of knowledge is total confidence. That's why when you meet these Mahatmas, they're totally relaxed and totally confident. And anything that happens, good or bad, they don't move. They're just like rocks. In fact, Christ said that, a very beautiful statement by Christ. He said, on this rock, I build my church. Now, Now what rock was he talking about? The self. Duh. His life, his subtle body is what? Is built on the self. It doesn't change. Right? This is why even when they're tormenting him, he says, hey, forgive those people. They don't know what they're doing. Because his life, his subtle body, his jiva, is what? Situated in awareness, on awareness, as awareness. He says, I'm my Father, awareness, and I, the Jivatman and the Paramatman are one. This little self that I think I am here and this big self are one self. It's just the same self. And that's a rock. That's knowledge only. Yes, sir.
So ideally, we have to commit to lifelong learning of the scriptures and meditating.
No, don't, please. Do not commit to lifelong learning of the scriptures and meditating. We can be committed to knowledge, however it comes. Be committed to understanding. So I said, because knowledge is the only thing that sets you free. That's where the power is. That's where the freedom is, in the knowledge. You can read scripture till the day you're done, for 500 years, and never get any wiser. The ashrams in India are full of idiots who know the scripture right and left, and they're full of meditators, who are dumb as a loaf of bread. Seriously. No, because not by karma are you going to get there. Not by meditating, not by studying scripture you're going to get there. Now, you may get there while you're meditating or when you're studying scripture, that's possible. But those actions will not guarantee the result of moksha. Unless you're an inquirer, unless you're always asking, who am I? Unless you're a discriminator. Who am I means what? Is the thought that I'm thinking right now, is the thought of who I am that I'm thinking right now in harmony, true to my nature, or is it not? That's called discrimination. That's called inquiry. If you want to do a practice, that's the practice. Look at whatever thought you have about yourself right now and see if that thought is in harmony with who you are. And if it's not, you throw it away. You don't meditate on that thought. You release it. You let it go. You say, sorry, not me. And you turn your attention to awareness. And the only access to awareness is through knowledge. That's why we're teaching you. The reason the only access to awareness is through knowledge is because you're already awareness. You're already awareness and you're already experiencing awareness. You're never experiencing anything other than awareness, always. So, if you're, so all I have to do is think I'm awareness, and then my mind goes there and I start to experience and understand that I'm awareness. I take it off the thought, I'm small, inadequate, I want, I don't want. This is the basic thoughts, That's the jiva thought. I want and I don't want. And the truth is, I'm not a wanter. I'm free of wants. So when you find yourself saying I want, then you look and then you think, who wants? Who wants? Do I want? No, I don't want. I'm awareness. I'm whole and complete. Huh? If you say I'm doing, if you catch yourself thinking, I'm doing this, your wife says that, you said, no, I'm doing this. I can't wash the dishes now. You say, I'm doing this? Say, excuse me, I'm not a doer. I'm the knower of the doer. So I can't, And immediately you stop thinking that you're the doer, and then you see that you're the awareness. Immediately you're back to yourself again. And you just keep working on your mind with your mind all the time until you've killed that tendency to think that you're something other than what you are. And that thought becomes constant, that I'm awareness, and then the thought dissolves into awareness, and you're left free with the thought I'm awareness also. That's the method. Yes, sir.
We talk about knowledge. It seems to me there are different kinds of knowledge.
Yes, there are.
The one we are talking about related to intuition?
No. Intuition is unreliable. The knowledge you get from intuition comes from the causal body, and it's unreliable. You can have the same intuition, a different intuition about the same thing at different occasions. You can't count on that. That's not knowledge. Intuition is not. Knowledge is what is always good, which you can always count on, which doesn't change from one moment to the next.
Well, it depends on the knowledge, doesn't it?
What's that?
The knowledge.
Well, now we're.
To rationalize my feelings.
Uh-huh.
But this is not a knowledge, actually.
No, that's not knowledge. No. By knowledge, I mean, okay, there's knowledge is the definition. There's two kinds: direct and indirect, and there's relative and absolute knowledge. Now, knowledge of anything in samsara is relative. It's subject to time and space and change. You could call it information, actually, except knowledge of the cosmic principles. Those principles are relatively real in the sense that they're always good as long as the creation is here. When the creation is gone, then of course that knowledge is not any good. But since this creation lasts for billions of years, the knowledge of any one of these dharmas or tattvas, these principles, is called knowledge. But that's relative knowledge because it's relative to the field of existence, to the presence or absence of the relative to the apparent reality. Now, absolute knowledge is knowledge of what? Awareness. Because awareness never changes. Awareness is always present, and awareness doesn't change. Right? So that knowledge is knowledge you can count on. It means you, awareness, are always present and you never change. That's all the knowledge is. And now, you can't forget that knowledge when you understand that what awareness is and that you're awareness. Why? You can forget relative knowledge. Why? Because the object of the knowledge may not be present. If the object of knowledge is present, then the knowledge is present. But when the knowledge is what? The object's not present, the knowledge may not be present. But tell me when you're not present. There's never a time when you're not present. You're always present, which means the knowledge is always good. And once you know that it's me, then it's all over. But if you think it's the knowledge about something other than me, the one who's always present, then you can forget the knowledge. You can't actually forget the knowledge when you know it's you because you're always present.
So actually we talk about knowledge about the subject.
Knowledge, that's right, it's a knowledge of the subject. And the subject is always present. It's very simple, actually. It's so simple, huh? People say, oh no, it can't be that simple. they want it very subtle or complicated, or they want it some experience or something like that. And everybody that gets moksha, and a lot of people have been getting moksha through this teaching in the last years, they'll all tell you the reason I didn't get it because it was just too simple. It was too obvious. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's called the royal secret, and that's a kind of joke, right? Because this is the most valuable thing in the world. Now, like say I've got a really expensive ring, I spent $50,000 on it, and now I wouldn't leave that ring sitting in the satsang room, would I? Because these spiritual people will steal it from me. Believe me, they even steal, $5 things from the kitchen and from the store here. Did you know that? People in the ashram will steal $5 worth of €5 worth of chocolate candies, or take a book and sell the book on eBay. So I've got something really valuable. I've got a ring. It's worth $50,000. Now, will I leave that ring laying here? No way. It's too valuable. I will hide it. But the self-knowledge is like 1 billion times more valuable than what? Than any kind of material object. Yet I can leave it sitting right here all day long and no one will pick it up. Because what we want is experience or knowledge of something other than me. That's why we call it the royal secret. It's hidden in plain sight. It's you. That's why I said, don't go studying Vedanta, study you. This is a picture of you. Don't study Vedanta, study yourself. This is a means for studying yourself. Vedanta is the eyes. It's the third eye. We call it jnana chakshu. It's the third eye. It's the eye for seeing yourself. Since you can't see yourself with these two eyes here, you need a third eye, and the third eye is the teaching. And when you expose your mind to the teaching, that what gives you the vision of non-duality. It gives you the vision of who you are. Assuming you're qualified, assuming that the teacher is a competent teacher. So, yes, Andreas.
So the jiva thinks that he's experiencing objects, while actually awareness
is experiencing itself in the form of objects. It's experiencing self without objects and in the form of objects.
Apparent objects.
Apparent objects.
Yes, and problem is then always, it's necessary, the jiva can only experiencing objects.
That's all.
It's not possible for the jiva to experience or to awareness just as awareness. That's the problem.
There's actually nobody's ever experiencing anything but awareness all the time.
Yes, actually. Yes.
But actually, in fact.
From the perspective of the jiva, it looks like they were objects.
It looks like they're objects and it looks like you're experiencing objects, but actually all you're experiencing is yourself all the time. And you ascribe your experience to objects, to situations and places and times and so forth and so on. But actually you're only experiencing yourself 24/7. You're never experiencing anything but yourself. See how funny it is? It's really funny because I want to have a particular experience that will what? That will give me what? That will make me happy. But the happiness I'm already experiencing, it's myself. Because when you get what you want, then you start experiencing yourself. But you're experiencing yourself before you get what you want. See? You're always experiencing only yourself. Yes. Yes, sir.
But the awareness, when you're in this consciousness of non-duality and where you have this consciousness of being one with everything, isn't it also then, it's also encompassed with the inner feelings and attitudes or virtues like inner peace, serenity, because you're totally at peace with everything around you, and then because you see yourself and everything else through you, it is in contrast with this higher love too.
Yeah, that's sattva. Yeah.
Stuff. So it's a bundle of eternal virtues and feelings which are timeless then. Not time and space and.
Well, if you haven't got time and space, you haven't got any feelings. Because Now, no, what the virtues that you're talking about are a function of sattva guna. They don't belong to the self. Very Good calls it the opaque witness. It's actually sattva guna or Ishvara, and as pure sattva, pure maya. So, right. But an enlightened person, a person who's enlightened, knows their awareness, and even if there's vices, operating in the apparent reality, in other words, there are bad feelings and negative feelings and stuff, he or she's unaffected by that. So, moksha doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a particular kind of experience. In fact, that when you realize you're this, that your experience doesn't change. Karma and Ishvara doesn't know you're this. So karma and Ishvara keeps going right on as before. Maya keeps functioning as before. Your karma keeps functioning as before. You've just what? Stepped out of the dream. But everything in the dream stays the same. Until what? When you have stepped out of it, in other words, when you've understood that you're awareness, then you no longer feed the vasanas. And when you don't feed the vasanas, they burn up. And as they burn up, then your experience changes. But it's not that the enlightenment made it caused the experience to change. It's that the knowledge that I'm whole and complete means that you don't pander to your desires and fears anymore. And so what? Those desires and fears are what's producing a negative or unhappy experience. And so what happens for jnanis after a period of time is that there's just bhogavasanas. In other words, they just have a good time. There's just sukha-vasanas. Brahmanandam, paramasukadam. My chant, I make that chant. Brahmanandam. This is the limitless Brahman is what? The limitless awareness is paramasukadam. Sukha means pleasure. And this is limitless pleasure. Understand? That's what you get. Yes, so you're just an enjoyer. The doer goes, but the enjoyer stays, and you enjoy the bliss of your nature. Irrespective of the little blips of Rajas and Tamas that come. Yes, sir.
So awareness is one key attribute is that you can release anything that comes up in your mind, so you can stay in pure awareness without getting detached to anything.
Well, no. Yes and no, but who's going to stay in the pure awareness?
Well, yes, that's okay. Yes, you're always capable of.
See, because you're thinking of it, you think the jiva is going to go up here and stay in the awareness.
No, not.
No, it's not. It's not aware. It's knowledge. You know that I'm awareness, and so the knowledge keeps you from what? Indulging your fears and desires. You just don't do it anymore because you know there's no benefit. Huh? The jiva always thinks that when you're ignorant, you always think there's a benefit. You think there's an upside to indulging your fears and desires. You haven't realized that it's a zero-sum game and that there's a downside to it too, and that you don't gain anything by indulging in any of your desires and fears. You get an upside and you get a downside, and they both cancel each other. That's called a zero-sum game. And you know that. So there's no advantage to getting what you want, and there's no advantage to, not having what you want. There's no advantage one way or the other. That's what moksha means. You're free of what? Samsara. Because samsara just promises to give you what? Pleasure or pain. Take your pick. And if you're going for pleasure, you'll get pain. And if you're going for pain, you'll get pleasure. Because that's the way it's set up. It's set up that way. Now, jiva doesn't want to believe that. When you're ignorant, you feel like, you deserve a lot of pleasure. And so everything you do is to get pleasure for yourself. And in the process, you get a lot of pain. You reap a lot of suffering. Because that's the nature of the field. This Dharma field, that's its nature. Okay? But see, the language, if you look at you were right with the idea, but your language was dangerous language. It was experiential and dualistic. And you were expressing knowledge in an experiential and a dualistic fashion. And that can be very dangerous. Because it keeps the jiva alive. So, it's a good question.
One question to the enjoyer in the Panchadasi.
Yeah.
Is written true renunciation is letting go of the idea I am an enjoyer.
Yes, that's right. It is letting go of the idea that I'm an enjoyer, but it's not letting go of the enjoyer. The enjoyer, the doer and an enjoyer remain. For a Jivan Mukta, there's no doer, there's only an enjoyer. The reason it says that is because the doer's doing to enjoy, isn't it? So they're talking to the doer and they say, well, you better give up the idea of enjoying. Because it's a zero-sum game. You're not going to only get joy, you're going to get what? Pain also. You're going to get dukkha. Parama sukha, parama dukkha. You're going to get dukkha. Dukkha means pain. Understand? Yes, sir.
At the moment, it seems to me that the more I'm in charge of a responsibility in life,
Yeah.
and work, the harder it is to work without focusing on the results of my work, of my doing. Does it mean that I should quit everything?
Why are you focusing on the result? Why not just focus on the action and take the result as prasad,
As what?
as a gift?
As a gift?
Quitting work won't change anything. The reason the work is not satisfying is because the attitude you have about work is incorrect. Yeah, is that not, huh?
I think it fits.
Huh? No matter, if you're doing work now, you'll be doing work tomorrow because you've got Rajo Guna. You're driven by Rajas, so you have work to do. And if you're driven by Rajas now and you change your job, the Rajas won't go away. The Rajas will just go into some other activity. And it's the Rajas that's causing the dissatisfaction. It's not the work. Because Rajas is dissatisfaction. That's the nature of that energy. When you're dissatisfied, you're under the spell of Rajoguna, speaking as a jiva. Okay? Looks like that we're going to have to do the guna topic tomorrow.
I think this changes after seeing that there's no doer. So the rajas go down.
Yeah, that's right, sure. Yeah, knowledge kills the doer. It kills doership, let's put it that way. It kills the idea that you're a doer. Doing still happens. But once you're full, then there's no real reason to do things. There's no reason not to do things, but you're not driven to do things. Understand? This is why enlightened people are lazy. Even though they're active, they're quite lazy. Yeah. Oh my God, it's 10:15. Let's call it quits. That's enough. Huh? I'm not lazy. I wonder why people are getting out. It's 10:15. It's past my bedtime. I'm an old man. I'm old and weak and decrepit and
It's just the body.
just the body. It's not me. It's not me. Oh, thank you. Now I got moksha.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna